These days, it's really common to feel overwhelmed by all of the responsibilities we have, whether it's our families or our jobs or bills or whatever's piling up around us. At times, that feeling of being overwhelmed can actually become debilitating. And if you're looking for a way to avoid that and to better manage all of those responsibilities and all of those pressures that lead you to that feeling of being overwhelmed, our guest on this episode, Dr. Samantha Brody, has written a book that comes at a perfect time. It's called Overcoming Overwhelm, Dismantle Your Stress from the Inside Out. Dr. Samantha Brody joins us.
But first, this is the Fit Mess, where together we learn to develop habits that help us live beyond our mental health struggles to create happier, healthier lives.
He's Zach. He lives in the future with his anxiety.
He's Jeremy, and he lives in the past with his depression. And we get together once a week in the present to share the obstacles we face and how we overcome them.
It's something I've been hearing a lot. Maybe it's this time of year, maybe it's the weather, maybe it's a coincidence. But everyone's been telling me they feel overwhelmed right now. I feel it too. So while Zach is off on a whirlwind adventure around the globe, I decided this would be the perfect time to share with you an episode from our archives. When we interviewed Dr. Samantha Brody from the Evergreen Natural Health Center in Oregon, our lives were very different, but no less overwhelming.
So how do you deal with it? How do you cope? And are you overwhelmed or are you experiencing overwhelm? There is a bit of a difference. So we started our interview with Dr. Brody by asking her about the term overwhelm as she writes about it and what it means.
I think about overwhelm not as simply the feeling of overwhelm that we will typically, not typically the feeling when we say, okay, I'm overwhelmed right now. So that is one part of overwhelm, but overwhelm can manifest in many, many different ways for people. It can manifest with headaches. It can manifest with fatigue. It can manifest with anxiety or depression. It can manifest with whatever your weak spot is, because overwhelm, the way that I frame it, is not necessarily a feeling, but it's the result of having too many things going on at once in not just the main areas of stress that we think about, but overall in our lives.
I think that's really interesting because I've been doing a lot of healing, and I've been on a bit of a journey to better my health in every area. And I've battled depression all of my life. And I think just really in the last year or two, at some point I discovered that that the trigger is overwhelm, whether it's emotional or task oriented, whatever it is. If the storm gets too busy, I just functionally I just shut down emotionally. Everything, I need someone to like take me by the hand and pull me out, because I just get to a point where I'm just broken and I don't know where to go.
That's hard. I will say that one of the things in the book that I specifically work on with folks is to look at lowering the load in areas where you do have control, that it's easy, not necessarily in the areas that feel overwhelming, to allow more space and room to be able to then I guess I'll say, kind of go with the flow of how things are happening. Now, of course, there's a brain chemistry issue that comes with depression, which has to be addressed as well in many cases. But, sometimes it's not necessarily saying, okay, this thing is overwhelming me, the new podcast or the pile on my desk, but it's the food you're putting in your body, or the not getting enough sleep, or the conversation you need to have with your partner, or even just, limiting your kids' screen time so you don't fight as much, or, whatever that is. Looking at trying to identify what the things are that you do have control over that aren't necessarily the things that you think you would need to or want to address.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So as I was reading your book, though, I almost felt overwhelmed by all of the things that I could do to help myself.
Yeah.
And just going through that, I wanted to ask you, what is it about your book and your specific program that lets people get through that to get past the overwhelming?
I think that it can seem daunting and overwhelming when you do start to enumerate all of the different stresses in your life and look at what you may be able to change, because it's in many different areas. But the book specifically looks at first identifying what's most important to us. So what our core values are, how we want to feel in our bodies, how we want to feel emotionally. I call that our true north. And once we identify that, then when you start looking at the stresses, which is the second part of the third part. The second part is kind of getting your mindset ready to do it and knowing how you make change best. But once you start looking in this third step of the book, it's a 4-step plan, at all of the different stresses you have, it can seem overwhelming, except for that when you now have you have a way to vet what's most important, because you have these words. You have what's important to me is family. What's important to me is feeling, one person may want to feel energetic, another person may want to feel at ease. And so you're more able to vet which things to do that are most important. And we go through one thing at a time, right? Here are the stresses. Is this something that's non-negotiable to change? Is this something that's, low-hanging fruit? Is it something that has high impact? And, going through the exercise in the book literally allows you to be able to make those choices more easily. And I know, before we started recording, we were talking about that, you want to have a ton of time to go through all these exercises. And, what we can do, though, is take baby steps and say, all right, here's this one thing that I know is bothering me, just this one little thing, and shifting that, which allows you to A, feel accomplished, B, take control, and C, be able to vet your choices moving forward better as you're more clear about what's most important. So you don't end up with so many things on your list ultimately that don't line up with your values. And that's where we ultimately get overwhelmed. So it's really a dismantling. It's taking it apart. It's, pulling it into its pieces in order to be able to really make choices, because there's so much going on. That's modern life, right?
Totally. And that's sort of the thing that stood out to me as I was going through this book is I thought kind of the same thing, like, man, this is a lot of work, just like any journey toward healing or whatever would be. But what I found, I guess, that I most connected with was that I felt like you are basically helping the reader acknowledge all of this is going on in my head anyways. Like I'm already dealing with all this, but just in an unhealthy way that doesn't help me on a specific goal or a specific path. This just sort of helps you find that roadmap. It helps you figure out how much of this do I really need to deal with and how much can I let go. That was sort of my takeaway.
Right. And, and the great thing is that there are many, you can walk away with that takeaway. You can walk away with the takeaway of I can't fail at self-care. You can walk away with the takeaway of my values are the most important thing. I need to pay more attention to that. And so the book is very individualized, right? So you're going to be able to find what you need in it. And it's not, I've made a very strong effort to have it not be this kind of dogmatic, here is exactly what you need to do to make things better, which so commonly happens in the self-help world, is that someone says, okay, here's my solution. And that solution can get, should be applied by everyone. And ultimately, what we each need, this is very naturopathic. I'm a naturopathic physician. And, it's very naturopathic to say, okay, how do we approach this holistically, and what does this person need? And that's really what I'm shooting for here.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, though, everyone is their own person, and the solution that I get from your book is going to be different from the solution that Jeremy gets from the book.
Right.
But, the very first part of it is finding your true north. It seems like everyone is going to have to do that and figure out what that true north is. So can you tell me what that means and why that's so important?
Absolutely. True north, for me, is about knowing what's most important to us. And that's about what our values are and how we want to feel. And I'm actually going to provide for you guys, for your listeners, the first exercise in the book, which is the first part of the True North process, is looking at what your core values are. And I think that it's so often we feel like we know what's most important to us, but we don't really take the time to dive into it. And I had, one reader who said, I thought I knew exactly what was important. And when I did this exercise, I found that it wasn't what I thought it was, although it wasn't surprising. And just doing that one exercise made a big difference for him. And that actually allowed him more room to start working some of the other exercises in the book, where when he first picked it up and kind of just scanned through it, went, oh my gosh, this is, I don't want to put this time and energy. I don't have the kind of time and energy to do this. But the, understanding what's most important to us is fundamentally really the way we want to vet all of our choices, from the small things to, the small things of what am I going to have for breakfast to the big things of where am I going to live.
I guess I'm also just kind of curious, how did you get into this field? What is it about this because I know you've been studying and working in this field for a long time. How did you get pulled to this area?
So I'm a naturopathic physician and acupuncturist in the state of Oregon. That gives me primary care scope of practice, although I don't tend to work in primary care. This is my 22nd year in my practice. And what I found was that all of my patients, everyone gets diagnosed with something different and everyone has a different approach. But what I found is that fundamentally, when I was doing this work with people, helping them identify their values, how they wanted to feel, really looking at their stresses and what was the most important thing to address, because nobody can do it all, right? Often people will go to see a naturopathic physician or some other kind of, health practitioner who will give them this, litany of things to do. And they're like, I can't do all of that. Of course we should do all those things, but that's not going to happen. And what I found is that working these exercises in my practice with my patients and online with my virtual clients who I see, I can see people anywhere as long as I'm not diagnosing or treating on the internet, I was able to help guide them in a way that they were able to make more positive choices. So I went, all right, how do I bring this to more people? And I was doing speaking, and then I went, all right, it needs to be a book. And so it was really a process of systematizing what I actually do face to face with people and figure out how I can give them this so they can then go forward in whatever way that they're going forward in their lives with that personal growth, type of thing, right? You're making changes for your health, but how do we do that? And what's most important? And what is, how do we make these long game changes instead of just a short term, okay, I'm going to go on this diet or that diet or, start something and then not continue it.
It seems like these days everyone is overwhelmed and we've got way too much going on. And I saw a short video that you did basically saying that, everyone is overwhelmed and some people are hiding it better than others maybe. Do you think that in today's day and age, people are more overwhelmed than they ever were and we need different tactics to deal with that? Or, is it just something that's always been there and we're now just starting to uncover it?
That's a really interesting question. I think that we've always had many challenges, like humans. I think we often think, oh, well, this is the hardest time because we're in it. But ultimately that, as humans through time, we always have many challenges from, where is my next meal going to come from to, what am I going to, whatever they are, how am I going to get to the next village if this village is being, burned to the ground or, the major big things that have caused stress over time has, I don't think we're under more stress now, particularly. However, I will say that modern culture, in America anyway, is very, the cultural expectations that we have, that we take from what we see in the media and what it appears to be expected of us is very much to create a life where we have a million things going on and to take other people's needs ahead of our own so often, especially for women, we're often, but for men too, in some cases, made to feel guilty about engaging in self-care, right? And all of these pressures and societal ideals that we are supposed to ascribe to it's impossible. And I do think that part of that is the multitasking culture. Part of it is the number of hours we're expected to work, how connected we're expected to be, how we don't have community the same way to help us out. 100 years ago, you would never be in the house with your kid for 6 hours. You would be, you'd shoo your kid outside or your kid would be working or, the pressure that we put on ourselves to live a life that is looks a certain way, I think is related to modern culture for sure. For sure.
So sort of on the opposite side of that coin, I am really good at delegating things. I'm really good at deciding what's worth my time and what's not. Oftentimes, I'm more selfish than I am more worried about other people's needs, and to a fault, certainly lately. But I find that I actually have an abundance of time where I'm trying to then prioritize. Man, if I were doing something, how best could I use this time? And I almost get overwhelmed with trying to come up with, what should I be doing to make the most of this downtime? Have you come across that sort of perspective?
It's interesting. Again, when I said kind of women, I think that's a very typical, that's more common, I think, for men than for women as a rule, that, just because of our cultural expectations. And so I do see that. And the process works the same way, right? You want to have your eye on how you want to feel and what's most important. And then you have this, litany of things that you should or could be doing. And ultimately what you're trying to do is to create space. Exactly. That's exactly right. You're trying to create space in order to then slot things in that make you feel the way you want to feel, that make your life look like what you want your life to look like. And so if you do have an abundance of time, which again is the exception rather than the rule, it happens, I think having knowing what's most important makes it much easier to choose what to do with that time. But the other thing is you can't really waste time, right? I think that you can make choices that don't line up with your values, but time isn't something that you can use or waste. It's not a commodity. It's a cycle, right? We're able to say what do I want to fill this space up? The same way that you would fill up a room, right? How do I want to fill this space? And if you're consciously making choices and then taking this kind of guilt off of yourself, right? The piece where you're feeling badly about what if I choose the wrong thing to do. But it may be that it's great to have that. I mean, what a great problem.
Right?
What a great
I know.
problem to have.
I'm very spoiled by it. And I was very excited when I started reading your book and started really understanding the approach that you're offering and seeing how it can be beneficial to me, because that is the thing is I often don't feel like I know where I'm headed. It's always sort of, swinging to the next vine or just putting one foot in front of the other. And the exercises that you've laid out in this book, I know are going to be really beneficial in helping me figure out what it is I'm actually walking towards instead of just trying to stay upright.
Right. You know that Lewis Carroll quote with the Cheshire Cat, and Alice says, which way should I go? And then the Cheshire Cat says, it's just not a quote, but the Cheshire Cat says, well, wherever it depends where you want to end up.
Exactly.
At a fork in the road. And so being clear about what's most important allows you to make those choices better. I mean, there's great benefit in wandering as long as you know ultimately how you want to feel. You don't necessarily have to say this is exactly where I want to end up, but you do want to, in the process, feel good. I mean, you would hate to feel stressed and worried all the time or more than you need to because you don't have your eye necessarily on the specific thing, right? How can I feel better in the moment, even if this isn't going to get me to a goal, but it's going to get me to a feeling in right now, which is how I want to feel. Because ultimately, you just have we have the time that we have, and what do we want that to look like for ourselves and our loved ones is really underneath it all. Is what we're shooting for. Is how do we make choices in our lives that help us be the best person that we can be for our loved ones. And that means making healthy food choices. It means exercising. It means, whatever it is for you that's most important to feel your best.
Exactly. Dr. Brody, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for this book, and thank you for your work in this field. I can tell this is going to be a very useful tool in my journey forward.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thank you so much. All right, again, the book is Overcoming Overwhelm, Dismantle Your Stress from the Inside Out. It is available now. I've got an old-fashioned paper copy in my hands, which I normally don't do. I'm a big audiobook guy, but with a book like this where it is a little bit more of a workbook where there's practices and exercises and things to do, pick up the paper copy. It's handy to write in and throw around and throw in your backpack and take it with you and spend a few minutes working on yourself. So with that, we're about done. The website is thefitmess.com, and you can always leave ratings and reviews in the various places where you can get your podcasts. But for now, that's it. We will be back at thefitmess.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you then.
See you, everyone.
We know this podcast is amazing and doesn't seem to lack anything, but we need a legal disclaimer. Prior to implementing anything discussed in this podcast, it is your responsibility to conduct your own research and consult your physician. You should assume that Jeremy and Zach don't know what they're talking about, and they're not liable for any physical or emotional issues that occur directly or indirectly from listening to this podcast.